of Age by Paleowriter. Chapter 3. Rarity picked up her right hoof, grimacing at it.
Covered in mud and filth already. Why didn't I think to bring my boots?
She tilted her head back, rolling her eyes skyward at her own incompetence.
What else didn't I think to bring that I'll end up needing?
The stars shimmered above her, as Rarity racked her brain for any other useful items she might have forgotten.
If I only wasn't on such a rendezvous schedule with those gods, I could go back and get my boots, and maybe a few extra bars of soap.
Alas, she agreed to meet a segment of the Canterlot Guard on the far edge of the forest by sunup, at which point they then stay back and give her a day's start. They trail her at a distance, looking out for her safety during the remainder of her trip. Rarity sincerely hoped they'd be as good as tracking her as Princess Celestia promised he would be, especially since he was giving up going back for boots just to meet them on time. Resigning herself to muddy hooves, Rarity walked onwards through the small clearing she stumbled into earlier. The ground squished uncomfortably with every step, making awful, squelching noises that made Rarity wince.
Hopefully these noises won't attract the attention of any of the less savory inhabitants of the forest,
Rarity thought to herself, keeping her ears perked up for the slightest sound of an attacked her. She'd been lucky so far, and she knew it. Odds were that she'd come across something unpleasant sooner rather than later, though. She prepared a dazzle spell as a last-minute distraction move if something did come after her, but she'd rather not have used it. Then, almost drowned out by the chirping sounds of the everfree night, Rarity heard a scream. The unmistakable scream of a young pony.
Oh no! What other pony could be in the forest right now?
Her head spun around as she tried to pinpoint its direction.
Help!
The faint cry sounded. There! Rarity's eyes locked onto the source of the scream. A gangly creature flew through the air, its leathery wings beating rapidly. It struggled to carry with it a familiar-looking wagon and schooner, with 3 fillies dangling precariously from its claws. A cold shock crashed through Rarity.
Sweetie Belle!
All promises to Princess Celestia and the Canterlot Guard were immediately forgotten. Rarity's hooves couldn't move fast enough as he chased after the beast that had her sister. Spike clambered through the thick forest, racing after the Cunimar Crusaders and their extremely scary-looking kidnapper. If only he brought some parchment and a quill, he could have written a note to Twilight to bring help. But he hadn't. And there was no way he was going to turn back to go get help and lose sight of Sweetie Belle, Scootaloo, and Applebloom in the process. He was the only one who knew where they were and what they had gotten themselves into, after all.
Gotta get up!
Spike's breathing was ragged, and his muscles felt like they had been torn to shreds. But he didn't dare slow down. The forest was dark. If he lost even a moment of time, he might lose the fillies forever. He forced himself over a fallen tree, slipping slightly on the damp moss. Spike's eyes followed the creature, making a slow descent in the distance. Once it was below the tree line, Spike lost sight of it. But that didn't stop him from running in the direction it had gone.
It's landing!
The thought brought both relief and added panic. Landing made it easier to catch up, sure. But landing also meant it was getting ready to make dinner out of its catch. His heart tightened in his chest.
Hold on! I'm coming!
Spike dug under a mass of busted tree limbs, wincing as they scraped across his face. Then he had to skid to a halt as he almost ran into a dark boulder in his path. Spike ducked around the rock and continued on in the direction he saw the beast go.
Just what is that thing anyway?
Spike wondered. He'd never seen anything like it. Horned head and wings, like a giant bat, but a long, scaly body like a dragon, who lost more weight than was healthy. He had no clue what it could be, or just how quickly it may devour the ponies. The sounds of screams gave Spike confirmation of which way to run. He remembered just an hour earlier, when it had been the sound of giggles leading him in the right direction. The difference was panic-inducing to comprehend.
Yeah, well, this is what happens when you go into the everfree forest at night!
Spike mentally chided the fillies, pushing a bunch of ferns out of the way.
What were they thinking? What was Rarity thinking? She was the one to go into the forest in the first place!
Spike's heart beat faster. He held whatever creature had been chasing didn't have friends. And if it did, that none of them had Rarity. He burst through a thorn bush, brushing at his scales to knock the poking thorns away.
Let's go!
Sleebell's familiar squeak sounded. Spike looked up quickly. Just ahead of him was a pond, the moon reflecting in its calm waters. Next to it was a scene completely the opposite of calm. Scootaloo's tail was trapped under the beast's claws, but she beat it at it with her two hooves viciously. Applebloom was loose somehow, leaping about and doing high flip kicks at the creature's stomach. Meanwhile, Sleebell was held tight by a huge fist, struggling with all her might to break loose.
Take that, you big hunk of ugly!
Applebloom shouted, careening into the monster's chest. Scootaloo punched at the reptilian arm repeatedly.
I said, let us go!
Sleebell chomped her teeth down on the hand holding her up. The creature howled in pain. They've got annoyed, but not enough to give up on him yet, Spike realized. They were actually doing okay on their own, but he still clearly needed help. Yeah! Spike leapt forward from the bushes. Let them go!
Stop!
Applebloom looked over, startled. Spike! Scootaloo exclaimed, mid-punch. Sleebell's eyes flew open. Her teeth still clamped down tight on the scaly finger. Spike raced into the fray, gearing up his fire to full blast. Admittedly, fully blasted wouldn't be that much, but the monster was no dragon. He was sure of that, which meant there was a chance its scales weren't fireproof. He inhaled deeply, feeling the flames kindling inside him. He was about to exhale when the creature spoke. Find your own food, dragon! Its voice sounded like some pony was slowly stepping on a set of bellows. Spike swallowed his fire to respond. These ponies aren't my food! They're my friends! Now, let them go!
Friends? Ha! A likely story.
The creature wheezed. The scales on its head were long and winding around its face, almost like a thin lion mane. Horns jutted out in all directions from the scales. Spike gestured down at his short stature. Look at me! How would I be big enough to eat 3 ponies? The monster narrowed its eyes at him, sizing him up. It took a few minutes. Okay, so whatever it isn't the smartest of species.
Perhaps you have a point.
It conceded. It looked back down at the 2 fillies in its claws.
More be they then.
My if I could stab ya!
Applebloom shouted, launching another kick attack. She was immediately swatted aside. Spike winced as Applebloom hissed into the ground, scattering through the leaf litter. Meanwhile, the creature opened its mouth wide, reaching down towards Sleebell with sharp, dripping fangs. No! Spike leapt forward, grabbing onto the beast's outstretched arm and swinging himself over it, so he was between Sleebell and the gaping maw that formed the creature's mouth. I told you to let them go!
Why would I do that?
The creature asked, pausing momentarily to eye Spike. Spike felt his body trembling. Because... It glanced behind him at Sleebell. Her eyes shimmered, pleading, looking down to where Scootaloo lay trapped, with Applebloom by her side. He saw identical expressions on both of them as well. They're counting on me, he swallowed. Because ultra-intelligent creatures like us are going around and eating each other, Spike said, trying to appeal to creature's vanity. Obviously.
Meat is meat.
The creature shrugged. Maybe it didn't have vanity. At least, not about its brain power. Plan B. Well, if meat is meat, Spike tried next. His shaking was almost out of control, but he somehow kept a grip on the beast's arm. Then eat me first! Maybe you'll be too full to eat then! And laughed a wheezy, thin laugh.
A gargoyle. Eat a dragon. Oh, this would be too much.
Exactly! Spike exclaimed, relieved that he finally had the thing agreeing with him. A gargoyle, huh? So that's what it is. I'll fill you right up! You might as well let them go now.
Spike, no!
Applebloom yelled from below.
You can't do that for us! No way, Spike!
Sleebell agreed. If you're going to eat Spike, you're just going to have to eat all of us! Scootaloo yelled fiercely. It would have been touching if it wasn't so stupid. Shut up, Skidaloo! Spike wanted to yell back. Didn't they see he was trying to help them? The gargoyle laughed some more.
I didn't mean you'd be too much to eat. I can most certainly eat you and your pony friends with no problem.
Fine then, Spike said. He began restocking his inner fire. Prove it!
You're shaking dragon.
The gargoyle mocked.
You're afraid, and you're putting up your courage in the wrong place. Oh well. Goodbye, my cowardly cousin.
The giant mouth opened once more, reaching for Spike this time. Everbloom leapt up toward him, but just couldn't get high enough of a kick. Sleebell Scootaloo screamed. Just as the gooey, saliva-covered teeth reached the top of Spike's head, Spike let out his dragon breath. Green fire filled the gargoyle's mouth. It shrieked and fitted his arms, sending Spike flying. Sleebell and Scootaloo were released from its grip as it clawed at its own mouth. According to Twilight's books, gargoyles could make fire much like dragons could, but theirs wasn't nearly as strong. Spike had known it was a gamble to try the trick, but it paid off. The gargoyle just couldn't handle a mouthful of dragon flame, even from a baby dragon like himself. Spike pushed himself back to his feet, allowing for a smug smile as the creature tore off into the night.
You'll do it, Spike!
Applebloom tackled with him a hug.
That was the coolest thing ever!
Scootaloo exclaimed. Almost as cool as the Sonic Rainboom!
That was more like a dragon fire boom!
Sleebell chimed in. All three fillies burst out giggling at that. Rolling along the ground near their wagon was the gargoyle had also left behind. Spike wanted to laugh with them, but he was still too shaky. Those teeth had been really close to his head.
Sweetie Belle!
Rarity's voice called from a distance.
Sweetie Belle! I can hear you! Where are you?
Spike's chasing stopped. Rarity! He exclaimed, breathless. She was okay. Rarity was okay. She was nearby, and she was okay.
Over here!
Sleebell's voice called through the trees. Rarity raced along, desperate to get her sister. The horrible things he heard. Screams, roars, trees toppling, crashing.
If Sweetie Belle's hurt even a little bit, I'll find that beast! On!
Rarity pushed past the last branch, separating her and her sister.
Sweetie Belle!
Rarity exclaimed, running over to the little filly. Relief flooded her. Her sister was, at the very least, okay enough to stand.
Are you okay? Are you in pain? Tell me if anything hurts.
Rarity set her hooves on Sleebell's shoulder, looking her over. The darkness made it hard to see if there was any bruising.
I'm fine, Rarity.
Sleebell pushed her sister's hooves away.
Really? But the beast hurt you! I saw it!
Rarity said, refusing to stop her fussing. Her sister was filthy. There was a pond nearby. Maybe she could use the water to help wash her coat. Sweetie Belle pushed Rarity's hose away a second time.
Really, I'm fine. Spike saved us.
Spike?
What?
Rarity spun. There, against the grove of gnarled trees, between Scootaloo and Applebloom, stood Spike. He bore one of the most serious expressions she had ever seen on a dragon's face.
Spike saved them.
I'm glad to see you're safe, Rarity, he said. Her mind couldn't begin to process everything that was going on.
Spike, what are any of you doing out here?
Rarity asked, the question finally hitting her.
What are you doing out here?
Spike countered, his eyebrows knit in concern.
Rarity, it's the middle of the night, and this is the Everfree Forest!
Exactly,
Rarity huffed, narrowing her eyes.
It's no time for little fillies to be awake, much less trespassing upon some place as hard as... It's my fault, Rarity,
Sleebell admitted, interrupting her sister.
I followed you with Scootaloo and Applebloom, and then Spike must have... What?
Rarity exploded.
How could you? Enter the Everfree Forest, and you!
She spun at Spike, betrayal stinging in her heart.
You let them? How could you? Sweetie Belle could have been hurt!
Let them? Spike took a step backwards.
I did! I wasn't! I'm not here because I wasn't! I was following them!
Rarity bristled, yanking Sleebell over and throwing a protective hoof around her.
My baby sister! How could you do this? I did
didn't! Spike yelled, stamping his foot. I followed them! I heard them outside the library and chased after them when I realized where they were going. Then that gargoyle came.
Gargoyle?
Rarity gasped. Yes, and then Spike saved us! Skulu interrupted the dragon.
Hiya, so don't be mad at him.
Applebloom agreed.
Seriously, Rarity, it's my fault.
Sweetie Belle said, squirming out of her sister's grip. Their words swam around Rarity's mind like dye stirring into water. She stumbled backwards, trying to sort it all out.
Sweetie Belle followed me. Applebloom and Scootaloo followed her, and Spike followed them. Then they got attacked and Spike...
Rarity's eyes flooded with tears.
Spike saved them. Spike saved Sweetie Belle.
The chirping, nighttime forest noises filled the silence as Rarity worked out what to say next. She snapped at Spike, when the dragon deserved none of it at all. Why, if it wasn't for him...
Spike, I'm so sorry,
she said, dabbing at her eyes.
I was emotionally distraught. I reacted before I had all the facts. I should never have accused you of such irresponsibility.
Spike, who had been wringing his hands nervously, the poor dear, dropped his arm to his sides. Thanks, Rarity, he replied. I forgive you. You were just worried. Rarity bit her lower lip, looking at him. His eyes were still downcast.
I've gone and done it again. I've always managed to hurt him.
Rarity hung her head insane. Then she remembered why she was in the Everfree in the first place. She glanced up at the sky, checking to see if there were any signs of daylight yet. Still none.
Listen, I've got to,
She trailed off, looking at the three fillies leaning up against one another. Their eyes drooped. Next to them, Spike yawned, a wisp of smoke filling his mouth. She just couldn't leave them falling asleep in the Everfree forest. Rarity knew that much. But the Canterlot Guard... She had to meet them at sunup. There was such a thing as being fashionably late, but Rarity didn't feel like this was one of the proper situations for it. She really should strive to be on time.
Though,
she looked around. After all the running she'd done, Rarity had the stomach-sinking realization she wasn't quite sure where she was. She needed to look at her maps, including the star map she borrowed from Twilight. She magicked her lantern on and set it on the ground by her feet.
Perhaps it's a good idea to get some sleep,
Rarity suggested.
We should be safe for tonight if we stay together.
She lied. There was no way to guarantee safety. But she knew Sweetie Belle would truly fall asleep if she was worried about something. The three fillies nodded their heads simultaneously and sunk to the ground, passing out almost immediately. Spike rubbed at his eyes, stepping closer to Rarity as she sorted through her bags for her maps. Can I help you with anything? Spike asked. Rarity shook her head.
You just need to get some sleep,
she said, squashing down the warmth and knowing Spike was still willing to help her out when he clearly needed to rest. And also, that's after she treated him like a moldy, moth-eaten roll of cloth.
All right,
Spike insisted. What can I do?
Nothing, Spike, really,
Rarity replied, unfolding her maps magically in front of her.
I'm just sorting out where I am now and where I need to go in the morning.
Spike scratched his arm. Aren't we going back to Ponyville?
You are,
Rarity said. She gave him a significant look.
I'm trusting you to get Sweetie Belle and her friends back safely in the morning. I would do it myself, but I made a promise, and I really can't go back on it.
Wait, where are you going? Spike asked. His green eyes narrowed. Rarity hunched her shoulders, looking away from him.
I've got to go through the forest, to the other side, what the tar Princess Celestia gave me.
To the other side? Spike exclaimed. But that's crazy!
It's what I have to do,
Rarity said calmly, tracing herself along the map, and began sorting out where she'd run that night. But it's too dangerous! Spike started pacing back and forth next to her, his purple scales reflecting lightly from the lantern light. You can't! You'll be hurt! Or worse! He turned to her, his face stricken. You have to let me go with you!
Spike, I'm perfectly capable of walking through a forest on my own,
Rarity said.
Your offer is kindly meant, but I'm afraid it's impossible to agree to.
But, Spike began wringing his hands for the second time that night.
Spike!
Rarity said, softly putting a hoof on his shoulder and looking him square in the face.
If you come with me, who will get the girls home?
Spike looked up at her. Lantern light flickered in his eyes. Rarity held in a small breath. While she'd seen the look from him before, the level of concern the dragon's expression carried for her never failed to catch Rarity by surprise.
Rarity,
Spike whispered. He blinked. His eyes looked a little damp.
Is the rest of your job going to be as dangerous as this first part? This job you have to do alone?
Rarity could feel him tremble from where her hoof sat on his shoulder. She opened her mouth to lie and held Colin down, but the words that weren't the ones that she intended at all.
I think so, Spike,
She found herself saying,
and I must admit, I'm rather scared by the whole idea.
His eyebrows knit together.
I see,
he said softly. Rarity's breathing was shallow. She was more than scared. She was terrified. She was going to be completely alone.
Unless you take Spike by his offer to go with you.
The idea of Spike being there, by her side, was so tempting. But no. Rarity shut her shoulders. If Spike came, he'd be in danger with her. She couldn't let that happen. Rarity dropped her hoof down from where it sat and turned away from Spike.
I'm sorry, Spike. I didn't mean to make you worry so much.
Rarity apologized, looking back down at her map. Spike was silent for a moment, but he eventually spoke.
It's all right.
The dragon slunk away, lying down on a patch of moss near the pond.
Just stay safe. I'll get Sleep Bell and the others home. I promise.
Thank you,
Rarity whispered. Her hooves moved forward of their own accord in the dragon's direction. She took several involuntary steps before she realized what she was doing.
No, Rarity.
She shut her eyes, taking in a deep breath and regaining her willpower.
No little cheek kisses tonight, as much as he deserves one.
Rarity held herself in check, backing away from where Spike rested.
It does hurt him worse if you eventually find out that he's actually
She swallowed.
too young.
She looked over at her sister and two friends. He wouldn't be there if it wasn't for Spike. She shook her head. This was far more confusion than any one mare should have to handle on her own. Spike slowly opened his eyes. Daylight streamed through the forest canopy. Most forests would be awakened with some cheery scene of songbirds or basking turtles. But as Spike sat up, all the sunlight managed to do in the Everfree was make the skeletal trees look like they glowed like eerie daytime ghostly scary things. He looked over to Rarity and been poring over the maps just hours earlier. She was gone. Spike was hardly surprised, though maybe that was part of the reason the morning seemed so gloomy. What did cause him to pause was when he glanced over on his other side to check on the fillies. Applebloom snored loudly. One, Scootaloo lay next to her, her wings twitching in her sleep. Two, but beyond them,
Sweetie Belle.
Spike's heart dropped straight down to the soggy forest floor.
No.
The third filly was nowhere to be seen.
Let's go after her! Killing my Crusaders, missing friend detectives!
This isn't a game, guys, Spike said, climbing up from a stump to appear as authoritative as possible. Applebloom and Scootaloo shut their mouths and looked up at him from where they stood by the dismal, scummy pond.
We need to be realistic. Sleepy Belle is missing,
Spike continued, hoping his hands weren't shaking too much.
None of us knows which way she went. She followed Rarity last night. She could be miles away from us by now. We're already lost. Or maybe that gargoyle captured again, and maybe she's fallen down a hole, or maybe...
So what are we waiting for?
Scootaloo interrupted. Let's go! Wait!
Spike hopped off the stump, darting at the orange filly, and holding his hands to stop her from running off.
No! We can't just go chasing off in a random direction in the Everfree forest.
We just won't pick one at random,
Applebloom said, stepping forward.
Maybe we can figure out which way she went first.
Yeah! Did Rarity tell you where she was headed?
Scootaloo asked. Spike shook his head. A chilly breeze buzzed past them all.
See? Not really,
he said, shuddering from either the wind or his half lie. He couldn't tell.
She's heading out of the forest, all the way to the eastern edge and beyond. I don't know exactly where, but I guess we could start by heading east. But I promised Rarity I'd get these fillies home. Would she want me to chase after Sweetie Belle, possibly losing 2 more ponies in the process? Or should I get them home first and put together a rescue team? Spike glanced up at the sky, which had begun to cloud over. What would Twilight do?
If Rainbow Dash were here, she could just zoom right through the forest and fight Sweetie Belle like that!
Skillo said, slamming her front hooves together in emphasis.
Applejack would have just tied her down.
Apple Blue sighed.
She's real good at finding Winona when she gets loose.
Heck, even Fluttershy would do a better job out here than us,
Skillo grumbled.
Remember when she saved us from that cockatrice? Remember when I saved you from that gargoyle?
Spike wanted to point that out, but held his tongue. They weren't trying to be insulting toward him. They were just being realistic. This is exactly what he told them to try and be. It was true. Pretty much any pony would be better in this situation than him. He couldn't fault them for pointing that out.
Still, though,
Spike crossed his arms, shelling his shoulders back and narrowing his eyes.
Maybe we should,
Spike started, but was cut off as an orange blur sailed into his chest.
Off! Whoa!
Skulu exclaimed. Spike stumbled backwards, trying not to fall. When his eyes found what had hit him, they lit up.
Pee-wee! He gasped. What are you doing out here? What are you doing out here?
An all-familiar voice demanded. Uh-oh.
The big sister!
/ mother figure!
Twilight!
Spike spun toward the unicorn, relief washing through every scale on his skin.
Thank goodness!
Through mossy forest branches, Twilight walked into the clearing where Spike and the fillies had slept. Pee-wee continued to flutter around Spike, trilling enthusiastically. Twilight matched Spike toward her, throwing a hoof around him in a hug.
Spike, you nearly gave me a heart attack. I woke up, you were gone, Pee-wee was going crazy, and as soon as I opened the door, he flew out toward the Everfree Forest of all places, and...
Spike hugged her back.
You have no idea what's been happening,
Spike said. He backed away from Twilight so he could look her in the eyes to explain.
I followed the fillies last night into the Everfree Forest, and then this gargoyle... Sweet Mouse, listen! Apple Bloom interrupted. So we went after Rarity! Spike totally destroyed the gargoyle, but then we were lost in... Wait, Sweet Belle's been kidnapped by a gargoyle?
Twilight asked, interrupting Scootaloo. Her eyes danced in a panic.
No,
Spike said, shaking his head quickly. Well, hopefully not. Spike, I think you better start at the beginning, Twilight said. She sat down by the edge of the pond, waiting expectantly. Spike sighed.
That's what I've been trying to do!
He thought to himself, but he knew better than to grumble at Twilight.
Alright, here goes.
Rarity sidestepped quickly away from a passive poisoned joke. Her hooves tripped through a viny paths of some other plant, which she sincerely hoped wasn't anything worse than the one she was trying to avoid.
Ugh!
She stuttered, turning and careening right into a spiderweb.
Ugh!
She repeated even louder, sinking the thin silk strands off her face.
This forest! I'm so sick of it!
Rarity tripped into a small mud hole and screeched in rage.
Ugh!
She had enough of the outdoors. She wasn't even a full day through her quest yet. Rarity pulled her feet out of the sticky mud and stumbled to the side, glancing out on the ground and letting out a sob.
This is impossible!
She gasped. She could only take a moment to rest, some time to actually get some sleep. This wasn't the first time she pulled an all-nighter before, but it was also the first time she'd done it while filling those hours with intense running, crazy amounts of panics, and emotional goodbyes. Rarity pulled her thoughts away from the night before. She didn't have time to dwell on the images floating in her mind. Sweetie Belle, asleep in the pile of fillies. Spike, his eyes closed tight together in a restless slumber. She shook her head. The sun was up. She was late for a meeting with the Canterlot Guard. Rarity felt her eyes watering.
Feeling already.
She pushed her tears away, wincing as she streaked mud over her cheek with her hoof. Not much she could do about that now. She just had to press on. Rarity continued to head east,
following the newly risen sun. It was with great relief as she wandered past the old ruins, where long ago she and her friends had faced off against Nightmare Moon. Rarity knew those ruins were near the edge of the forest, and would be much farther now.
Oh, look! A nice crystal tree down there.
The unicorn subconsciously put a hoof to her throat, remembering how the element of generosity appeared around her neck, changing her life forever. She had been a simple shop owner with simple dreams. She just wanted to become a top fashion designer, famous throughout all of Equestria, for her dresses and its super exclusive clients. And then there were the elements of harmony, taking down discord, fighting off changelings, getting kidnapped by diamond dogs, getting kidnapped by a dragon, fighting Sombra, and taking down and changing your elements back, and then there was that whole thing with the vine. Oh wait, that didn't happen. Everything had changed for Rarity when Twilight Sparkle came to town. She brought with her adventure. She brought with her Spike. Rarity sighed. Yes, her priorities had changed. Taking on this journey was clear evidence of that. A little part of her longed for the simpler times. But as she walked through the forest and thought more about it, Rarity knew she would never trade her friendship with Twilight and Spike for all the fashion awards in Equestria. The trees became more sparse. Rarity's head lifted up slightly. Was she finally out of the forest? She felt herself kick up her pace into a trot. Yes! Yes, she was! Rarity went into a full gallop, racing into the meadow ahead of her. I'm so sorry I'm late! Rarity apologized, calling out. She glanced around for the guards. They must be quite bored for now, waiting for her to show up. Though perhaps they were relieved to have some time off. Princess Celestia had sent them over for their extended doings near the coast after all. Probably right next to Equestria. Rarity slowed her steps, looking left and right in the clearing. Hello? She called. Anybody there? Silence answered her. Rarity stood, frozen still, as a breeze softly pushed the blades of grass around her. The guards weren't there. Rarity swallowed.
All right, no need to panic. They might just be running late, as you were.
She sat down.
I'll just wait for a bit. It'll be fine. They'll come.
Rarity couldn't believe how nice it felt to sit on the dirt and grass. She was sure her coat was getting filthy, but she couldn't bring herself to care. At that moment, the only thoughts she could process were that she needed to wait for the guards, and that it had been a long time since she had gotten any sleep.
Oh, well, okay. Well, okay.
Twilight paced back and forth. This is the situation. Understatement of the year there, Twilight. Thanks, Spike said, rolling his eyes at the mare. So, what do we do? He'd hoped that when he finished his story, Twilight would have an immediate plan of action. That was her specialty, after all. She was the playing queen. But apparently, that wasn't the case. Twilight just continued pacing back and forth, getting her hooves more and more muddy by the minute on the banks of the scum pond. Scootaloo and Applebloom had the good sense to be quiet as he thought through the possibilities. Well, with only a vague idea of which way Rarity went, and therefore which way Sweetie Belle followed her. If Sweetie Belle followed her, Spike pointed out, we can only hope she did. Right. Spike made a squeaky noise of panic. We need to find Sweetie Belle. That's a priority. But we can't know which way she went for sure, though most likely following Rarity means going to the other side of the Everfree Forest. We can't possibly drag two more fillies through the forest, though. Twilight looked over at Scootaloo and Applebloom. We have to get them home. Then we can organize a full search party and head out of back to find Sweetie Belle. And Rarity? Spike asked.
Spike, you know full well that Rarity can take care of herself, and that she's on a mission for the princess that we shouldn't interrupt,
Twilight said.
So we find Sweetie Belle. If she's with Rarity, then we find Rarity too. But if she's not, we'll just have to let Rarity finish whatever job it is she has.
Hey, wait a minute, Scootaloo said. So we're going back to town? Without Sweetie Belle? To organize a search party, yes, Twilight said. And you two get back to safely.
But we want to find Sweetie Belle,
Applebloom protested. You can, Twilight said.
Really?
Applebloom asked, her eyes shining. Yes,
Twilight replied. For the safety of Ponyville. Now let's get going! Twilight turned and began to walk away.
Hi!
Apple Bloom yelled.
No way! We're finding her now! Together! Yeah!
Scootaloo agreed.
The two fillies stood side by side, holding their heads high. Twilight stopped walking and gave them a look. Neither filly moved. Spike fiddled with his claws. Pee-wee on his shoulder. No pony budged, and the stare-off continued. Spike stood.
You can't win against them with stubbornness, Twilight. Trust me. Guys, listen. We have to fight Sleepybell, yes. But remember earlier how you were saying how Rainbow Dash and Applejack could do a much better job? Well, that's what Twilight means here. We go back, not abandoning Sleepybell, so we can get the other ponies to help find her. 'Cause you know, on our own, we wouldn't be that great at it. I mean, yeah, even with Twilight, we need help.
Scootaloo and Apple Bloom eyed each other, considering. Eventually, they both hung their heads.
Yeah, okay, so...
Apple Bloom said.
That's the only way, Scootaloo added. It is, Spike said. Well, I think it is anyway.
It is, Twilight said firmly. Thanks, Spike. Are you all ready to go now? The fillies nodded their heads glumly, and they followed Twilight out of the clearing. Spike walked behind them, Pee-wee nuzzling into his cheek. Little guy must have been the whole reason Twilight found him in the first place.
Thanks, Pee-wee. We would have gotten out of here without you.
The baby phoenix trailed in delight.
Enjoy that little guy while you can, people. Enjoy him while you can.
By the time they finally got back through the evergreen forest and past Fireside's cottage, Spike could scarcely trust his eyes. Ponyville had never looked more inviting. Spike wanted to run into the library, slam the door, and fall into his bed. However, as they walked into town, Spike knew that was the opposite of his options at the moment. He had to track down Sleepybell. That meant getting the search party together and heading back into the forest. Pee-wee flew around Spike's head as he followed Twilight through the streets of Ponyville. Scootaloo and Apple Bloom were abnormally quiet behind him. They had been the entire walk out of the forest that swallowed up their friend. Spike had to drag their wagon behind him, with Scootaloo's scooter tossed in it. The little orange filly didn't look up to moving it herself. She didn't look up to anything. Neither did Apple Bloom. Both of them dragged their host along, barely keeping up with him. Spike snatched the side of his cheek with his claws. He didn't know what to say to make them feel any better. He wasn't any happier than they were when they had to leave Sleepybell in the forest somewhere. There wasn't anything good about the situation, except maybe that at least not all three fillies had gotten lost. Okay, let's get you two to Sweetie Apple Acres, Twilight said, nodding back at the fillies. We can meet up again with Applejack and start putting together our search crew. Apple Bloom and Scootaloo nodded. Spike grimaced. Poor girls, he thought to himself, sighing inwardly. But then his grimace twisted, and his cheek muscles yanked back in a familiar way. Spike belched, materializing a letter out of his fire. He dropped the dragon handle and snatched the ladder out of the air before it fell in the street.
Twilight! Message for Princess Celestia!
Twilight stopped in her tracks, quickly trying back to Spike, and the fillies, masking the letter out of his hands.
What is it?
Scootaloo asked.
What's the princess got to say?
Apple Bloom wanted to know. Twilight scanned through the letter, her eyes getting wider and wider. Spike, I think our search party might be doing double duty, she said slowly, lowering the letter once she was done.
What is it?
Spike asked. Pee-wee landed on his shoulder, leaning forward with interest.
The guards Princess Celestia asked to help Rarity on her quest haven't reported back to her in over 24 hours,
Twilight explained.
She thinks he might be in trouble.
They may not even ever met up with Rarity.
What?
Spike exclaimed. Where was his paper-breathing sec when he needed?
Rarity was supposed to have guards, and they aren't reporting in? Well then, Rarity needs help, like, now!
Twilight nodded grimly.
Exactly. Spike, grab Sparkler. We're gonna pull double time in organizing this stuff.
Sparkler smiled and nodded.
Yes! The premier organizer of Ponyville's back in action!
Rarity? At the sound of her name, Rarity slowly blinked her eyes open. Ernie, you again?
Unicorn felt a hoof nudge her side.
Sweetie Belle, not now.
Rarity mumbled, covering her hose with her eyes to block the light. She wasn't sure what time it was, but she was quite certain it was too early to be awake. Her body informed her that she needed at least 3 more hours of beauty sleep. Sweetie Belle paused, and Rarity nestled further into the grass.
Wait.
Rarity's eyes flew open. She looked at her feet.
Sweetie Belle, what are you doing here?
The meadow breeze pushed past Rarity, rustling the grass surrounding her and her sister. Abundant sunshine shone down on both of them and reflected out the nearby stream. But the scenery at the moment was lost on the unicorn. Everything flooded back in a flash. Her mission, the ever-free forest, leaving her sister, Spike, her sister's friends, arriving the meadow. No guards to meet her.
I followed you,
Sweetie Belle said.
Follow the gods. Well, yes, I can see that.
Rarity replied to her sister, waving one hoof around, flustered.
But why?
The Sweetie Belle completely lost her mind.
You were going deeper in the forest,
Sweetie Belle explained, pacing back and forth through the clover path she had been standing in.
I had to make sure you were safe.
Her voice squeaked on that last syllable. Rarity winced. Safe. Her baby sister. Trying to keep her safe.
The gods are supposed to keep me safe.
Rarity thought to herself, looking around.
And they still aren't here.
She bit her lower lip, and she looked back to Sweetie Belle.
Sweetie, what am I going to do with you?
She groaned.
Do you have any idea what you've wandered into?
Sweetie Belle didn't look Rarity in the eye.
Well, not exactly.
She set her jaw.
But what did you want me to do? You were...
Rarity couldn't bring herself to listen, as Sweetie Belle rambled on about how impossible it would be not follow her sister, as he was wandering away into the evergreen forest. There was only one thought in her Rarity's mind.
How do I get her back home safely and not break my promise to the princess?
They were at least a day's walk from Ponyville, if not more thanks to the dangers of the evergreen forest. Rarity knew she was lucky enough to get through the forest unscathed herself, but to attempt it again, and this time with Sweetie Belle in tow, Rarity shuddered at the thought. But what choice did she have? Who knew what dangers lay ahead in her mission? Looking around the meadow, Rarity still couldn't find any signs of the guards she was promised. Without guards, just how could she walk into giant reptilian territories and be assured safety? Much less assure Sweetie Belle's safety. Rarity bit her lower lip. She was caught between a diamond and a crystallized rock wall, that was for sure. Some part of Rarity's mind registered that Sweetie Belle was still talking. Her ears faded back into the tirade of her little sister, just in time to shut her up.
And how was I supposed to know if you... Hey, what's that?
Sweetie Belle stopped talking, and instead gazed over Rarity's shoulder. Rarity turned. It was her turn to gawk. Coming straight at them, hovering gracefully at the stream, was a long, purple serpent with a familiar flowing mustache. Oh, aren't you guys in for a treat?
It's...
Rarity stared, blinking as the creature drew closer. Oh my! The river is quickly, doesn't it? What an adorable little tributary! Unfortunately, it doesn't do much for us swimming types, the sea serpent said. And then he smiled at the two ponies, and he promised for them across the meadow. Oh, it's been too long! Rarity, the most generous one! Oh, too long! And my, who is this precious one with you? I know that you come alone, but isn't she just charming?
Who was this, Rarity?
Sweetie Belle asked, her host dancing nervously. Rarity smiled in return, ignoring her sister, gaining her composure. She took a step forward toward the sea serpent. She had her suspicions, but she couldn't just plain guess, really. Of course, this was why the sea serpents wanted to see her.
It has been far too long. May I say, your mustache has grown and even more fabulous than before.
Oh, thanks to you, the serpent bowed in her direction. My friend Crackadoodle Donkey says my mustache looks even greater than ever. He really likes it. Rarity blushed a bit.
It's rather embarrassing, and I'm ever so sorry, my dear, but I'm afraid the last time we met, I never did catch your name.
Really? The sea serpent asked, putting one hand to his sock. I will be! Well, allow me to introduce myself then. My name is Stefan Magnet, Duke of Sea Serpentina, and your recommender, escort, and guide to my kin. Remember when I said that Avengers was probably the hammiest I ever gotten? Scratch that. I think I may have broken my own record.